So today I'm going to give you a little update on the outdoor enclosure, and we're going to make some improvements to it based on the comments that you guys have left. So if you guys haven't seen this before, inside this rainproof enclosure we built a 2000 watt solar system. It's got a 60 amp charge controller. We've got some ventilation in here to help keep everything cool, and a thermostat to kick the fan on and off. And this all runs off of a 12 volt lithium ion battery. And this is a self-heated battery, which is good for being outside in the cold weather. It'll make sure that it is warm enough to be able to take a charge from these solar panels. So I've been using this to run a 1 horsepower sprinkler pump to water my garden. And this 2000 watt inverter, honestly, it's just on the edge of getting the pump to start. But it did it every time. I ran it for 2 weeks solid, every day for 2 weeks. And really the battery, it's only a 100 amp hour battery, and the pump's 1000 watts. So due to conversion losses and stuff like that, I should really only get about maybe an hour's worth of runtime out of that pump before the battery would be drained. But with the 800 watts of solar panels on here and it constantly charging, I was able to get over 2 hours of runtime out of the pump with everything set up the way that it is. But overall, I'm happy with the way this all turned out. There's not been any water get into this cabinet. The only thing that's in the cabinet is there's some small, like gnats, really tiny bugs. We're able to get through the screen, and there's some dead laying in the bottom of the cabinet. That's the only thing that got in. So very happy with the way this all turned out. And keep in mind, this got watered on every day by that sprinkler, so it works just fine. So now I'm going to take this off. We're going to take it back in the shop. We're going to make some improvements to this, and we're going to go install it at a different location. All right, got it. So I've got it mounted here in the workshop, hooked up to the battery, and now we can go over the changes we're going to make. And the first one is, a lot of people were concerned that this battery cable runs in and directly hooks to everything. There's no circuit protection on the battery. But there is circuit protection. It's built inside of the battery. It has a battery management system, and it has overcurrent protection in it. And I believe it's rated at like over 100 amps for 3 seconds, and it will shut off the battery. And that should get faster as the amperage increases. There'll be a point in time, whether it's 200 amps or somewhere in there, where it will be just instantaneously, it'll shut off the battery. So it does have current protection in it. It's just nothing that you can see or reset or switch on and off. So for added protection, what we're going to do is we're going to add this waterproof DC circuit breaker, and we're going to put it right here next to the positive battery terminal inside of the battery enclosure. And this will give us maybe some added security, but it'll also give us a way to turn the battery off right inside at the battery as well. So it's going to give us a little more functionality. We'll go ahead and we'll get this wired in. So to hook up the breaker to the positive terminal on the battery, I've just made up about the smallest piece of battery cable you could make. So I'm going to go ahead and crimp this and heat shrink it, and then we'll get it hooked up. A lot of times on these bigger lugs, you got to crimp them at least twice, maybe 3 times, depending. And you always want to pull on them, make sure they don't come apart. All right, you can see everything is off. And then we just push this lever to reset it. And now it's on. So that works. It's booting up. And you can see if you want to turn it off, you just push this button. That lever kicked out and it's back off. Now the next concern that people had is that the power from the inverter, it just comes down here to these terminal blocks, where one goes to the thermostat and the fan, and then we have power also come out, and it goes to this receptacle here on the side. So people thought there should be some type of circuit protection on the AC side in case there was a short circuit or overload. And really, you're not going to get, in a short circuit situation, this inverter is probably going to, the voltage is going to drop, the amperage is going to drop. It's not going to be able to produce the current that a normal outlet would if there was a fault. But just for protection's sake, I got a 20 amp breaker here, and this is a DIN rail mounted breaker. And we'll go ahead, we'll put that on the power side in here, straight off of the inverter basically. And if anything would happen to short circuit, it would be no different than the outlet in your house that's protected by a 20 amp breaker. It'd be exactly the same. So we'll go ahead and we'll get this mounted. So I think I've just got enough space here on this DIN rail to get this mounted. All right, so now I've got the power wire coming down through the breaker, out the bottom of the breaker, then back around and into the power distribution. So now everything is protected. So another comment I got is somebody asked, what about a vent? And I don't think they meant like a normal vent, because it is vented, right? It's got a fan here, it's got holes for air to flow through both sides. What they were meaning was a vent drain. I believe that's what they were meaning. In case water did get into here, you wouldn't want it to pool up, and if the door sealed at the bottom and not the top, you would get water to slowly rise in here, and you could have a few inches of water in the bottom. So normally on these rainproof enclosures, you do put a vent drain at the bottom to let out any moisture in case it happens. And that's what this is. This is it's a vent drain. You see it's got a little screen here in the bottom. I think this one's 3/4 inch threads. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna go ahead and punch a hole in the bottom, and we'll get this mounted. And then any time if water does get in, it's only gonna get as deep as these threads. As soon as it gets deep enough to go in the top, it'll drain out. That is the bad thing I don't like about these vents, is typically they do stick up in the cabinet a 1/2 inch or so. So you're always gonna end up with like a 1/2 inch of water in the bottom if you are getting water in there, but this will keep it from getting any higher than that. This is why I went Milwaukee. So all my DeWalt drills I've burnt up. I've got them to actually smoke, and then they've lost all their torque. They have no power anymore. They work for light duty things, but anything fairly rough, just gotta get out to Milwaukee. So when I built this cabinet the other day, I couldn't find my hydraulic punch. Well, I found it today. Sure makes a lot nicer hole, that's for sure. And this one here, it's just the one from Harbor Freight, and it works just fine. Hopefully you can see the vent mounted underneath, and you can see on the inside, it's gonna stick up just a little bit. So the only other improvement we need to make is when we mount this, I probably need to install a ground rod. So we can go ahead and at least get the ground wire in, and then we can go mount it in its new spot. So I've got some number 6 solid ground. I put a ring terminal on the end, and I'm gonna attach it to the bolt that holds in the back plane. And then I'm just gonna slide it through one of these cord grips. And this one, I love this style right here. It will tighten down really far. It's got a wide range on it, and I'll link these in the description below too. So if you look back in this corner, you can see the ground wire comes up and bolts right there, and then goes out the cable gland. And we just need to get this hooked up to a ground rod. So one other thing I'd like to mention, if you're going to build a system similar to this, and you're going to put it somewhere that could possibly get below freezing, you are going to want, if you're using a lithium battery, you are going to want a self-heated battery like this one. Or else you're going to want to put the battery like inside of a garage or something like that that's attached to a house and won't get below freezing. You're going to need to keep it in a warmer location. Right now I've just got this in a battery box, right? It's a thin battery box. So if I'm going to leave this out all winter, my best bet would be to build an insulated enclosure to put this in. Remember, this is a sealed battery. It doesn't off-gas anything. So you can seal it up inside of an insulated enclosure, and it would help the heater that's in this battery, it would help it be more efficient and keep it warmer without using as much energy. So that's something that I may have to look into in the future is creating an insulated box to put this battery in, just so it doesn't have to heat so often. And your other choice would be to use a lead acid battery, like a sealed deep cycle lead acid battery. The only thing you would have to do is you would have to change the settings in the charge controller and tell it that it's a lead acid battery, because you charge those batteries differently at different voltages, so you'd have to make sure you set that up correctly. But I think we're done in here, so let's go put this in its new spot. So I'm gonna mount this rainproof enclosure back on this back corner of the carport. So right now I've got a 50 or 75 foot extension cord that is ran back there all the time. It's been ran back there for probably a couple years now, and now I can get rid of that extension cord and power it with this enclosure that we built. So what it's powering is this 3-strand electric fence, which makes up the perimeter of our pig pen. It's about a half-acre area that we have, and it doesn't use a lot of energy, so I probably don't have to put as many solar panels up, and it'll just be a way I can continue to test this enclosure as the weather gets colder. I found it was easier just to leave the breaker with the enclosure wiring, because the screw on the battery is just easier to deal with, being Phillips. Well, I found one problem with my design is that button, the lid hits it. So I just have to put the lid on, like, not completely, just to cover it up. There's always something that doesn't work out perfectly, so I think it just makes more sense for me to make an insulated enclosure to put the battery in. I can make it big enough that that battery breaker can fit inside. That's just something I'll have to do later. So right now I've just got one 200-watt solar panel up. I would need to add another board right here, and then I could do 2 verticals and have 400 watts, but that's all I'm gonna do today. So inside, everything is powered up, and there's only 0.2 amps going to the battery charging it. So it is trying to charge off of one 200-watt solar panel. It's just, you can see that the sun is way down right now. Now, let's see if this big transformer fits inside of here. I think it does. Yep, our fence charger's working, it's flashing. And we do have a ground rod right here that our ground wire is attached to. All right, our enclosure is all hooked back up, everything's running, and we'll test it again in this location for the next couple months. And eventually, when I rebuild my firewood shed, that's where it's gonna go. It'll power outlets and some lights once I get that rebuilt over there. But for right now, this will be a good spot for it. So far, after using this enclosure over the last 3 weeks, I'm happy with everything in it. It all works perfectly fine. And I'll try to leave links to everything we used in the description below. And the lead time equipment, I've had no issues with that. And I think right now they're having some type of October Halloween sale. I think some kind of Halloween sale. So I think there's only a couple days left. But if you're interested in that stuff, I think some of it may be on sale right now. And if I was going to use this enclosure to run that sprinkler pump all the time, I would definitely get a larger inverter. And you could possibly maybe buy a low frequency inverter if you're wanting to run like a pump like that. That's probably the best bet. And I would definitely get a second battery. That way I'd have a longer run time if I needed it, especially if there wasn't any sun outside to help keep it running. But anyway, guys, the sun is going down, so I think that's it for this video. I didn't get this built exactly the way I wanted it. I think I would have preferred to get all 800 watts of solar panels up there if I could, but it just didn't work out. I don't have enough time in the day to try to make that work out in this video. But really, for the loads that I'm running right now, just that fence charger, and then I may use it to be able to charge and jump start the tractor over there. I really think that it'll work perfectly fine with the small amount of load that it has with only a 200 watt panel on there. And I know it's not the ideal setup for that panel, you know, being vertical like that, but I think it'll work for the small amount that I'll be using it over the next few months. But anyway, guys, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.